Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much, my fellow swimmer. Thank you so much. You know, I love that picture, honestly, at the end. It's not so much because of the memory of the triumph, but because it doesn't matter how old I get, I will never look that bad again. So, you know, they say every life story, no matter how eccentric the details of the vocabulary, has the nuggets of inspiration or philosophy that we can relate to in our own lives. Frankly, I'd love to take the next 5 days, stay here in this beautiful home, and have every one of you. Some of you are young. You may not feel like you have a true philosophy of life yet, but there's a reason you're the superstars and you're here. And I personally would love to hear each one of you. Why? What have you learned from your grandmother? What have you learned from your mentors? How are you approaching your life, your family, your work? But it's not your turn today. It's mine. So here's my life story. And it is replete with a number of different areas besides the long-distance swimming. But the truth is that narrative, that chasing of a dream and having the courage to fail, because the chances were very, very high of failure, are born out of a philosophy that came early for me. So let me start by playing you my song. This is the humorous part of the program. Reveille, get up! Get up! Don't miss the dawn. Don't miss your life. And I was lucky. This ethic came into my life very young. I had a Greek father who was dramatic. No, he was more than dramatic. He was histrionic. Every day was an emotional exaltation for Aristotle, Zenith, Naiad. Wake us kids up 3 o'clock in the morning. Tears standing in his eyes, that buzzing Z's, rolling R's accent of his. Kids, I have just been to the ocean. It is a Rembrandt painting. It will change your lives. Hurry up, we must go see it. Dad, we have school in a few hours. We need to sleep. I am your father, no? I am here to teach you the lessons of life, no? Lesson number 1, most important lesson of all, sleep is highly overrated. Get up! 20 minutes later, the whole family is strolling at the ocean's edge. The amber moonlight from our ankles out to forever. It was a Rembrandt painting. It changed our lives. On my 5th birthday, my father called me into the den. Over here on the desk, he had opened Webster's big, fat, unabridged dictionary, his hands resting on the pages, again, tears standing in his eyes, and he called to me, Darling, you are coming here. I have been waiting for this day for you to turn 5. Because today, darling, I'm going to tell you the most important thing I will ever tell you. Come here. Your name, my name, the name of my Greek people, it is in the bold black and white important books of dictionary. Tomorrow, darling, you would go to your little preschool, huh? You will ask your little friends, is their name in the dictionary? They will tell you no. You are the only one. Come here. I'm going to read for you. Naiad. In Greek mythology, my people, the nymphs that swam in the lake, river, ocean, and fountain to protect for the gods. Definition number 2, modern definition. This is the special one for you, darling. Naiad. Girl or woman, champion, swimmer. Oh my God, darling, this is your destiny. Well, I didn't know what destiny was. I was only 5. But the word I heard that day was champion. And I started walking around with my shoulders a little bit higher. It wasn't too long after that, elementary school, I had a geography teacher who was an ex-Olympic swimmer. the most charismatic character you'd ever meet in your life, after my father, of course. And he said that any kid who came out for the swim team would get an A in geography. I've learned since that most swimmers start their careers this way. I was at the pool the next day. He had us swimming up and down. He wanted to see what he had. And I stopped in this lane over here after about 15 minutes. He was standing right over the lane, and he yelled down to me, "Hey, kid, you. Yeah, you. What's your name again?" I yelled up, "Naiad." He said, "Naiad? You're going to be the best swimmer in the world if you want to work that hard." I did. I was attracted to the commitment of the sport. 4:30 in the morning, every morning. Never an alarm clock needed. 1,000 sit-ups every night, elbow to knee, every one, never 999. I was a committed little swimmer when the Cuban Revolution broke out, literally overnight. Thousands of Cubans flooded into my hometown, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We were eating Cuban food. We were flying the Cuban flag. We were dancing salsa in their living rooms. And if I would be allowed to make a quick aside on that, I'll tell you that I was royally pissed off to be thrown off Dancing with the Stars early in the competition after learning a rhythmic salsa from real Cubans as a child. Just saying. We had a mystique in our hometown, I dare say the world over, about that forbidden island right off our shores. And I was standing on the beach one day with my French mother, who spoke with a thicker accent than my father, so right there, that's entertaining at home. I said, "Mom, I know Cuba's out there somewhere. Where is it? I can't see it." She said, "Oh, I will show you. Lift your arm up this way. No, it's more this way. There. It's right there. Havana is just across the horizon here. As a matter of fact, it's so close. You little swimmer, you could almost swim there." Swim there? Age 12. My father calls me back into that same den. Now he's agitated. He's pacing back and forth with his hands behind his back. The veins are sticking up on his neck. I said, "Dad, what is wrong with you?" "What is wrong with me? I make big mistake when I show you this dictionary. Now you are fanatic. This is 4:30 in the morning, Christmas Day included. We don't know to tell our friends where you are eating dinner. Some crazy place they call the training table. You don't know your brother and sister anymore. You don't go to church anymore on Sunday. Your muscles are coming big as a football player. Darling, your hair is green." That's right, Dad. My hair is green. And you know what, Dad? That's how people get ahead in life. They're fanatics. One day I'm going to stand on the podium at the Olympic Games. I'm going to bow my head for a medal for the United States of America. You know why, Dad? Because I'm a fanatic. And I'm glad we had this little talk, Dad, because I feel you don't understand me. When I say, for instance, I need to go to bed at 8:30 because I have the early morning call, Dad, I mean everyone in the family must go to bed at 8:30. He said, no, we do understand you. Your mother and I, we have been talking. We need to admit to you that we are, how do I say, we are very afraid of you. Listen, this is too extreme for us. We wish you all the luck in the world, but today we give you the key to the house. You are now on your own. My coach, as many coaches do, the coach who saw me that very first day in the pool became my father figure. He read my report card with me each time and told me I was smart and funny and going to be anything I want in this life. We were all part of Coach's family. We babysat his kids. Went over to Coach's house on Sundays for barbecues and the Dolphins games. Age 14, there's a big meet in our hometown. I hadn't lost in the 100-meter backstroke for 2 years now in the state of Florida. Went over to Coach's house for a nap in between the prelims and the finals. I don't know. Was it 3 minutes? Was it 4 minutes? It was quick. It was violent. And it was humiliating. I lost that night. The kids on my team thought I was coming down with the flu or something. We won. They were on the other side of the pool deck getting on their sweats. We're all going to go out as a team for pizza. Usually I'd be there, the leader in the thick of the action, but not this night. I went 17 feet underwater to the bottom of the diving well, and I screamed. I'm telling you, I screamed so loud, had I been above water, you might have heard me from Florida to San Francisco, and I screamed, no, this is not going to ruin my life. Me too. Athletes get real. Athletes get real. I didn't know yet that my talent as an athlete was swimming powerful miles over the curvature of the earth with a steel-trap mind. As a sprinter, my reality came to be hoping to make it to the elite Olympic trials. I'll never forget that last, or could be second to last 100-meter backstroke. After 8 years of 4:30 in the morning, 1,000 sit-ups every night, one more 100-meter backstroke, and I'm either going on to those elite trials or I'm going on to the rest of my life. I'm walking down the pool deck and a weight of the world on my shoulders. The coach, you all know how that epidemic goes. The first is a shocking assault, and then it becomes a coercion, and you're silenced and you're shamed. How could I, irrepressible, willful, be silenced and shamed? But silenced and shamed I was. It's complicated. My brother and sister had given up so many of their dreams. Mine were so big. My parents had sacrificed financially so I could be in the right training situations. And a friend came, Suzanne. My friend, who it turns out later, we were very close and we weren't sure why, but there was a draw, a support. Turns out she was undergoing the same molestations by the same coach through all those years. She grabbed me and she said, "You look like you're in a daze. This is the most important race of your career. Why aren't you in a sharp focus?" And I started in with all the sacrifices, and she said, "You know it doesn't work like that. You're the one. I'll never forget the speech you gave us a couple of months ago, the whole team. You had us in the bleachers and you said you have a dream. It's such a bright, perhaps untouchable star. You'll never get to it, but it's going to inspire you to the point you're going to have to tap down into every fiber of your potential. Summon every drop of your courage just to chase it, much less ever get there. And then you tuck that vision behind, you let it fuel you, and you get to work with focus and with discipline. And every day, every week, every month, every year, you climb and you rise. And yeah, maybe you never do touch that untouchable star of yours, but now you're up in the rarefied heavens. Well, you said you work in the trenches to achieve your loftiest goals. You're still in the trenches tonight. Let's forget about the reflection and the perspective. Remember, we just saw that incredible television documentary on the great tennis champion, Billie Jean King. Billie Jean says when she gets to Wimbledon, she doesn't march across and look at the 2-week draw and say, "Oh, yeah, I got to watch out if I get her in the semifinals. I heard her second serves improved tremendously." No, Billie Jean steps onto the grass like a cheetah on the hunt. The ball is her only focus. Not the opponent, not the ref, not the weather. All that natural talent, all those hundreds of thousands of practice strokes come out as she, cheetah on the hunt, chases the ball. Sweeps into the most perfect backhand ever hit. If the ball comes back, there's Billie Jean at the net with her signature overhead, and boom! 2 weeks later, she's walking around with the Wimbledon trophy above her head, which she did, by the way, 20 times. My friend says, "You get it. It's Billie Jean wasn't even playing the match or the point or the ball. She was playing the fuzz on the ball. She was in the trenches." Okay, listen. Maybe it's not as poetic as the fuzz on the tennis ball, but I want you to look here at this little half-moon sliver of your pinky fingernail. You know why? That race of yours tonight, you're going to make it or not make it by that much. I need this girl right now. I'm under her spell. We're on the pool deck. The 1,000 or so people virtually disappeared, and we're both like this. I said, okay, I see it. She said, all right, I'm asking you. In the 100-meter backstroke, how long does it take you to swim that little half-moon fingernail distance? I said, well, I'm going to say that's going to take 1,000th of a second. She said, no, it's not. Do the math. Come on. It's going to take less than that. I said, you're right. Let's say it's going to take a 1,000th of 1,000th of a second. She said, that's what it's going to take. So why don't you get up there and blast off those blocks with the shoulders you've built for 8 years and the heart that's unique to you that somehow drives you to do 1,000 sit-ups every night. And when you touch that wall, don't look up at the electronic scoreboard. Don't look around the pool. Close your eyes, close your fists, and say, I couldn't have done it a fingernail faster. She said, I guarantee you, no matter what happens, you do it that way, it'll be all right. Now I had a vision. Don't leave this much effort in that pool. And I blasted off with my shoulders and my heart. And when I touched that wall, I closed my eyes, I closed my fists, I said it, and I meant it. I couldn't have done it a fingernail faster. And I took a deep breath and looked. I didn't make it. I walked into the locker room. I thought for sure a cascade of tears would fall, but they didn't. I stood there tall and proud because it wasn't just that 100 meters. It was the 8 years, every day and every night. And I walked out of that locker room, a young person, a teenager, with a philosophy of life that's driven me all these days. I remember literally saying to myself, no matter what you do, no matter where you go, every day of your life, do it so you can't do it a fingernail better. No regrets. Life happened. There was college, graduate school, love, the pursuit of happiness, adventure. And I was swimming in a New York City pool one day, and one of my graduate student colleagues stopped me and said, I see you. I see that beautiful, cruising, streamlined stroke. I see the fire in the belly. You know, there is a sport after swimming, after sprinting, called marathon swimming. The earth is a blue jewel of a planet. It's 7/8 water. And these people stand on shores, a gun goes off, and they race each other across the lakes, rivers, and oceans of the world. There isn't much money in it, but there's tremendous pride, the grit that you develop, the friendships you develop. You see the world. Now, mind you, it's tough. Almost all these swims are cold and long, and you're going to be seasick and very uncomfortable. Matter of fact, the way to put it is there's just a skosh of masochism to this sport, and that's why I thought it would appeal to you. I found myself standing on the shore of Lake Ontario. Lake Ontario was 48 degrees that day. You're not allowed neoprene or any sort of protective suit. You can grease up, and that gives you a little bit of insulation for a couple of hours, but it sloughs away. I was standing there. I'd just been greased in 10 pounds of wool fat lanolin, which, by the way, is a singular experience unto itself. And I'm starting to notice the muscular Egyptian guys over here. The men and women swim together equally in this sport. And the lanky but also muscular Argentine guys over here. See, it's going to be a slugfest, that first mile. And the women's world champion, Judith Denij from Holland, 6'1", 187 pounds. You know, she looked a little more like a tight end than a swimmer. And she chose this moment, 3 minutes before the race, to introduce herself to me. She comes swaggering across the beach, these thunderous thighs of hers. I just thought for a moment that the beach trembled slightly as she walked. She got up to me and took a finger and jabbed it in the grease on my chest, jabbed it with every syllable again. I was so intimidated by her, I just stood there and took it. I had a bruise this big for a month. And she said, I hear you're a very good swimmer. Well, you're not going to beat me. And she went swaggering off. I'm going to tell you now, empirically, the beach trembled when she walked. I said to my coach, I'm not going in. These people are animals. And the gun went off, and I went swearing in Arabic to get my little space of water down there. And that was one cold, long, suffering 18 hours and 20 minutes across Lake Ontario. Everybody's got a boat. It's your comfort zone. It's your navigation system. They've got your food, your electrolyte drinks. They've got your words to try to get you fired up if you're starting to fail. And you swim off to the side and you follow that boat, and it's got an independent observer on everyone. Make sure you don't put on fins or ever hold on to the boat. And occasionally when I'd be over here taking a quick stop, you're in a race, and getting down some hot liquid, I'd see a swimmer who had quit go by on a boat, wrapped in a big fleecy blanket. But I didn't quit, and that was entirely the point. I was taken to the University of Toronto hospital emergency room at the end, core temperature quite low, and I was put on a seat in the corner of the ER here and wrapped in a Mylar blanket while my people went to check me in. And just at that moment, a young man was wheeled in on a gurney. He was in pain, he was writhing, he was emoting. I found out later he had been in a cigarette boat accident on Lake Ontario that day. He had a broken pelvis, broken jaw, all kinds of internal lacerations. He was in bad shape, and they wheeled his gurney over and parked it so that our faces were about this far apart, and his people went to check him in. I think just to take his mind off his pain, he asked me what I was doing in there. I just swam across Lake Ontario, and I'm cold. And it took me 18 hours. And he said, why the hell did you do that? So, we got chatting. He told me that he thrilled to have his hands on the steering wheel of his boat. Life or death in the balance. That's when he felt alive and awake and alert, and he wished he could take all those sensations to the other aspects of his life. But he said to me respectfully, why do something so long and suffering? And I said, it was a bit like a microcosm of life out there. You know how it is. You're on top of the world. You've got the tiger by the tail. You don't need anybody's help. And then you're down. Your best friend's gotten the diagnosis. Your father's lost his job. Somebody close to you has perished. And now you need your team, your family, your friends, your colleagues. My team that day gave me hope when I thought there was no hope left. They convinced me to take some baby steps. And when you start feeling your own pride, you take bigger strides. Now you're at the top of the mountain, and then you're down again, and you're up and down, and if you just don't quit, you make it to that other shore, whatever it is of yours. So my 20s, which were the decade of the 1970s, were all about these wonderful swims across the world, the Bay of Naples, Manhattan Island, Lake Ontario, the swims off the Argentine coast. But for me, those were noble. And when I listen to Simon and what he's accomplished, and we have a number of friends in common, the great Lynn Cox, who swum the Bering Sea, I am, of course, am admiring. But for me personally, always, those swims were here in this noble category, and then there was Cuba. Since 1950, some of the toughest ocean swimmers in the world, men, women, fast, young, had been trying to make that passage, in part because they call it the Mount Everest of the Earth's oceans. There's so many obstacles out there beyond your control, close to difficult, close to impossible to wrangle them all in 1, 2.5 to 3 day time period. And in part because it's the story of that forbidden land right off our coast. I don't know if you are aware of the history of the English Channel, perhaps still the most famous in name of swims on the planet. But Captain Matthew Webb was the first ever to swim it. He was English. 1875. Imagine how little Matthew Webb knew about cold water exposure and nutrition in 1875. And his buddies would say to him, Matt, you're the best swimmer I've ever seen. Why don't we go down to the Hellespont? Let's go down to the Aegean. Let's swim in a bit warmer waters. And he would say, the Hellespont? I'm English. This is the English Channel. This is the thoroughfare between the British Kingdom and the European continent. It's only the English Channel for me. Well, for me, it came to be only Cuba. And the distance is undeniable. It's over 100 miles if you're facing the map here from Havana due north to Key West. Now add the tremendous complication of the powerful Gulf Stream, the mightiest stream in all of the Earth's oceans, right here, emanating at the Yucatan Channel, squeezing through and just above Cuba, between Florida and Cuba, before it makes its northerly trajectory up the Atlantic seaboard. It is flowing here due east toward Africa, and it's going at 6.6 average miles per hour, while a swimmer, at least this swimmer, is averaging about 2.2 miles an hour. So you can figure it out. You're not easily making northerly progress, and you don't have much of a break up here. If you miss Key West by a little bit this way, you're off in the Gulf of Mexico. You miss it a little bit this way, you're off in the Atlantic Ocean. So you must north. Other swims, if you're solo, you take your time, unless you're trying to set a record. If you need to recuperate for 20 minutes and tread water, never allowed to grab the boat, never allowed to touch the kayaks. You may stop, but you got to tread water on your own steam. And you can look up at the stars and do a little Stephen Hawking gazing about the majesty of the universe. Not in this swim. You are northing, you're pushing constantly. The duress on the body is tremendous. I lost 29 pounds in my first attempt to swim Cuba to Florida, just during the swim itself, to give you an idea of the duress. So this Gulf Stream is now charging east across here. A genius navigator, which I had, John Bartlett, is every 15 minutes setting a new navigational course. She's strong. Let's charge her a little bit against the stream right now. She's really suffering. Let's let her go with it, and we'll try to make up for it later. And every time you're at your boat close by, and your team, 44 people, this is a true expedition. The shark team, the jellyfish team, the navigation team, the personal medical nutrition team, they're all on the epicenter of this boat here. And every time you're over there taking just a 25-second feeding to get going again north, or you're taking a 17-minute stop because you're in a crisis. You're in hypothermia now. You're in a state of sensory deprivation into hallucinations, and you can't remember what you're doing. When that team is dealing with that crisis for 17 minutes, you are going east this way toward Africa. And now, what used to be possibly impossible, 100 miles here, over here becomes 130, and so on as you go out east. I mentioned the sharks briefly, didn't I? So these are the oceanic whitetips, the lemons, the tigers, 50, 60 miles offshore. They're hungry. They're dangerous. You have no reefs out there. You have no bait fish for them to feed on. And when an innocent little swimmer comes by, making a little low-frequency vibration on the surface, from 2.2 miles away, they know just where you are, and they're under you in a hurry. How am I going to thank those guys of mine, those divers? Pitch black at night, we use no lights. Lights attract jellyfish. Lights attract sharks. They're diving under me, trying to see the fluorescent eyes of the predators. And if one comes charging up toward me, they use no fatal gear. We kill no animal on our watch. They've got a triangle of PVC piping. And they touch them in that sensitive ampullae of their snouts and move them out and move them over. They put my life ahead of theirs. As I say, how am I ever going to thank those guys? The box jellyfish emits the most potent venom on planet Earth. The Portuguese men of war, other jellyfish, are no picnic, but no one has ever directly died from a sting. When the box touches, it's called the Irukandji syndrome. 98% of people who have ever been touched by that tentacle die instantaneously. 2011, I swam into a swarm of them. Thousands of tentacles wrapped around the neck, around the bicep, down the forearm. I was screaming out to my head handler, Bonnie, I'm on fire! My spinal cord, I can't breathe. Anaphylactic shock. We have a crack medical team, University of Miami ER doctors. They can't hold me up, but they can reach over the side of the boat and apply an oxygen mask. They can get an EpiPen injection going, prednisone, anything they could think up to open up the airways. I swam through the night, swam through the entire next day, dusk the next night, stung again, swam the entire next day, and didn't make it because now I'm feeble, I'm weakened, and I'm being dragged east. I'm not making northerly progress. And I hope it doesn't sound too braggartly, but those ER doctors will tell you the reason I lived was will. I have a tremendous regard for all of, not only my fellow ocean swimmers, Simon, but for the great adventurers of our planet. The alpine climbers, to go up Everest, Annapurna, K2, the stories they tell. Ed Viestiers, perhaps you all know Ed and have met him or heard him, but Ed says that when he's above 26,000 feet on any of these peaks, and he has climbed Everest 6 times, more than any person except the Sherpas, without bottled oxygen, the pure way. He says when he's above 26,000 feet that when he takes a step of just a few inches, the duress on his pulmonary system is so egregious, he has to stand there for a good 25 deep breaths before he has composure enough to take a step of another few inches. Well, I don't know what it's like at the top of the world, but I do know what it's like far offshore under your own steam. And the issue for us endurance, long, ultra-endurance swimmers, other than cyclists and trekkers and climbers, is sensory deprivation. We've got fogged over goggles over our eyes. We're turning our heads maybe 55 to 60 times a minute this way. You're lucky if you could just focus on one red light on the boat to follow it. You've got a tight cap over your ears, trying to keep the heat in your head. You don't hear well. You don't see well. You are with Stephen Hawking in a very, very quick way, 12-hour training swims, 18-hour training swims, much less the real long thing. So I developed, as many distance swimmers do, a series of counting numbers, different languages, logarithms up and down to pass the time, and songs. I had a list of 85 songs. You're not allowed to wear headphones. This is just in your own head to help you pass the time. And because you're so grooved in with that metronomic stroke, you could almost count time like an atomic clock out there. So I would pick a song like Neil Young, especially in the middle of the night, that weirdo falsetto Neil Young's voice was just right. And I might sing a song like Heart of Gold, exactly the way Neil Young sang it. I can hear his voice in my ear. I can hear his guitar strums. And if I sing that song 1,000 times in a row, from the first note to the last, never losing count, I'm in it. I've been to Hollywood, I've been to Redwood, I've crossed the ocean for a heart of gold. I've been in my mind, it's such a fine line, keeps me searching for a heart of gold. And I'm growing old. Ooh. When I get to the end of 1,000 Neil Young, Heart of Gold, I am at 7 hours, 52 minutes to the breath. So my father was right, it's extreme. 28 years old, 1978, I'm brash, cocky. I walk down to the Havana shore, sharks, jellyfish, get out of my way. Huge storms came up. It's the problem with the tropics. It's yet another of the obstacles out there. You can't get a good weather forecast. Whatever you get turns around and becomes something the opposite very shortly afterwards. We're out in 8-foot seas. So an 8-foot sea, if I'm at the surface here, is crashing above the center of this ceiling. The shark divers can't see anything. I can't see the boat itself. We're swept far, far off course and we don't make it. 42 hours. We put it together and train the next year. And that's what it's all about. That's where the real sacrifices come in. Every day, relentless, unwavering commitment. And the wind won't cooperate. The wind comes out of the east for 91 days in a row and ruins our season. And that wind coming out of the east goes up against that Gulf Stream, heading to the east, and makes stiff peaks out there. Our navigator, John Bartlett, one day, when we're all depressed about this unending wind, brings us down to the dock and says, stick out your tongues. We got the whole team down on the dock. We stick out our tongues, and he says, what do you sense? We said, it's crunchy. It's the salt. It's crunchy. It's the salt vapor from the wind. He said, no, it's not. That's the Sahara Desert. They call it the Sahara dust. It blows here in between Cuba and Florida when the wind comes out of the east for many days in a row, 6,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean. We didn't go that year. What do they say? It's better to try and fail than not to try at all. The next year, we can't get into Cuba. No American, even the State Department can't help us getting into Cuba. Maybe it's the tragedy of sports. It's the only profession where you must retire young at a world-class level. I was getting offers now from the wide world of sports. Since I was a child, I'd been standing in the shower with a shampoo bottle as my microphone, saying, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat is upon us. So I left my beautiful Cuba dream behind. The next 30 years, you won't find me complaining, following the best in the world pursue their excellence, Wimbledons, Olympic Games, Super Bowls, World Series. But I kept my eye on Cuba. And every time a swimmer would try to make it across, I like to think myself a sporting person. I wasn't wishing anybody any harm or anything. But when they wouldn't make it, I would do a little happy dance. Oh my, it's illogical. I'm retired. I'm not chasing that dream anymore. But somehow the dream is still out there. It's still alive. Coming up to 60, I had never had a problem with any age before. And now I was thrown into an existential angst. I felt the malaise of a spectator. I'm chasing after other people, chasing their dreams. They're the doers. Even the Cuba swimmers who didn't make it across, at least they were out there trying. They were doers. I wanted to be a doer again. I went hunting in my office for a poem I had read once. I don't know about you, but I personally don't understand any poetry. When I get to the end of every poem I've ever read, I say, why? Why don't they just say it? But this poem had meant something to me, and I knew I needed it now, and I found it. Perhaps you know it. Mary Oliver, The Summer's Day. I must have read it 1,000 times that month turning 60, which was August 2009. I took it with me in the car, the breakfast table. We had it by the bed, walking the dogs in the morning. It was particularly those last two poignant rhetorical lines. Tell me, what is it you're doing with this one wild and precious life of yours? I think it was the 1,000th time. I was in my car. I screeched over the side of the road. I looked up in the rearview mirror. I said, my God, I haven't swum a stroke in 30 years. I was in good shape, but not swimming. Would the shoulders come back? Would the will fire up again? But that's what I'm doing with this one wild and precious life of mine. I'm going to go chase that perhaps impossible star that's going to make me be everything I am and everybody around me the same. I'm going to have the courage to fail. We put it together. Bonnie, John, Nico the shark diver. And we tried, and we failed. It's a vast, epic ocean out there. But every expedition, knowledge is power. Every expedition has its learning curve. You come home, and you take that new science, technology, ways to tap into the human will, and you put them toward the next one, and we train another year, and we tried and we failed again. And we put it together and tried and we failed again. So now that's 4 times. And now Vegas, went to 0.00% chance of anyone trying to make it. Dr. Timothy Noakes, arguably the top sports scientist in the world, University of Cape Town in South Africa. He had helped our team so much. He had taught Bonnie, my head handler, instead of just feeding me compressed NASA-type gels and goos for quick protein and quick calories, because you're digesting like this in the supine position. So a lot of what you're taking in goes into empty spaces. He suggested that Bonnie make a big vat of plain cooked pasta. And I would come over and tread water next to the boat this way, open my mouth. She would take pasta, fistfuls of pasta, drop them in, and try to coat the stomach and then take down the protein goos. Bonnie says that if things don't go well for us, there's always a job for us at SeaWorld. So, and Tim Noakes wrote me, listen, it's Valiant you want to try again. We're following you. We see all your press conferences where you talk about the grit and the magic of the journey. It can't always be just about the destination. And here you are in such a state of discovery. The people working box jellyfish science around the world are coming to your boat to learn more about them. But I'm sending you today all the charts. Here's all the math that will show you why this particular swim will never be done by any swimmer of any gender, any age, any era. Because you have to north so hard, you're going to be in a state of glycogen deprivation before you can take the 2 to 2.5 days it's going to take to get over there. And everybody the same. Sanjay Gupta from CNN, a friend now, had been following, said, we've loved traipsing after you and your team. It's really taught us so much. The public has enjoyed the inspiration of the quest, but we don't believe it's ever going to be done. I tell you what, if you ever make it, we'll be on the other shore waiting for you over there. And they were all the same. And I wrote them all or called them all back and said, listen, we've learned a lot from you all. We've appreciated your respect. But what you're forgetting is what this endeavor is all about. Yes, we have tremendous knowledge. Yes, we get better every time we try to make an attempt to cross. But this swim isn't about glycogen deprivation. This endeavor is about the power of the human spirit, and nobody knows what the limitation on that is. So we put it together one more time. The 5th time. We get the weather call. The whole team is sequestered in Key West. We're leaving for Havana in the morning. I was excited. I was ready, trained. But I will admit to you, I was scared too. Will this be the time I die out there? Will it be another failure? How many times will the team be willing to come back? I'm in Key West. I can't sleep. I go out strolling. I go into a CVS all-night drugstore, and there's only one other shopper in there. He's Cuban. He knows my story. He said, my God, I see your heart standing in your throat. Does this really mean so much to you? I said, it does. To me, this is an emblem of how to live a life. When I'm retired again, this is the same way I want to go about everything I do in my life. And there are 25 million people following us worldwide now. Most of them aren't swimmers. They're not even sports fans. They're just people who are watching a woman and a team who refuse to give up. 5th time on that Havana shore. That horizon looks farther away than it's ever looked before. We know what's out there. Bonnie comes and shakes my shoulders. She says, let's find a way. And I took the leap, the real leap, the leap of faith. That first day was glorious. I'm singing Janis Joplin. Don Bartlett's coming out of the navigation cabin all day with his thumbs up like this. Not 1 minute did we see that in the 4 other attempts. All day we're getting a good current, a good Gulf Stream, nice calm waters. That night the wind whipped up, and I had made for me a silicone jellyfish mask to protect the lips where the strands of tentacles had come across. because the highly scientific thick pantyhose hadn't worked that well the year before. But now this mask, you can't quite feel like you can with your bare skin where that little sip of oxygen is on a big wavy night. And I was getting hits of seawalls of water hitting in the mouth, taking down that, vomiting into the mask, and now nobody can help you. You've got to use your fingertips, which are now numb, and your tensile strength is weak, to try to find the edge of that silicone mask, get it up, clean it all out, get it back on. The next day, Bonnie and her crew, instead of calling me over every 90 minutes for that quick feeding, were calling me every 45 to try to replenish the loss of hydration and calories and weight I had gone through the night before. That second night, if it's possible, was worse than the first night, more hellish. Now I'm cold on every stop. Now I truly am forgetting who we are. You would appreciate, I saw the Taj Mahal, over here, just floating. It didn't occur to me it shouldn't be out here, but I was amazed by the pillars and the arches and the grandeur of it all. And Bonnie kept yelling, "We'll come back and visit it thoroughly another time." Right now, let's get keeping north. For some reason, I got fixated below me for a while on the yellow brick road. I saw it so clearly. I was seeing these little people walking. I couldn't make them out for a while. I yelled up to Bonnie, "Bonnie, are those the Cubans?" They came to call this the Cuban graveyard. And she was respectful. She took a look over, and she said, "First of all, I see the yellow brick road. You're right, it's there. But those aren't the Cubans. Don't worry about them. Those are the 7 dwarfs. And you know what's great about them? They're going right where you're going, so just get swimming and follow them for a while." I can't tell you how helpful they were. I was trying to remember their names, and they would be chatting and singing and whistling. It got me through many hours. Hi-ho, hi-ho, it's off to work we go. I was hanging on by a thread. I forgot who I was. I had no clues what we're doing out here and why I was so out of it. And Bonnie blew the whistle. She said, "What do you see out there?" I said, "I don't see anything. My vision's shot." "Come on, there's something. You've got to see it. Feather up." I feathered up. There was a thin white light across the horizon here. I thought, the third day is coming. It's the sunrise. The rays are going to warm my body. The sun brings us hope. And she said, "It's better than the sun. Those are the lights of Key West. It's what you've dreamed of since you're 9 years old, standing on that beach with your mother." And there they were, the lights of Key West. Actually, they weren't quite right there. Light is deceiving over water at night, and it took us 15 hours to reach that shore. But that was the moment of hope she knew I needed. 2 hours from shore, more or less, bright blue skies, palm trees. I asked John Bartlett to bring in the flotilla of boats of our team close by in a semicircle here. I could barely talk with the swollen mouth of salt sun exposure. But I said to them, "I guess I'm going to stumble up on that shore pretty soon. I guess somebody's going to take my picture. But don't you ever, ever forget my team, that we did this together. We made history together." So it's been 5.5 years, close to 6 years now, since the stumble up on that beach. And yes, I do remember the triumph of it. But honestly, what fills me every day is the relentless discipline, is the vision that could not be altered by box jellyfish, by 20-hour training swims, by defeat, by not even getting to go some years. And I stand before you today, almost 70 this summer, not that long-distance swimmer anymore, with that ethic of never, ever give up. I'm back to living that life of no regrets, of saying, no matter what I do every day. Win, lose, everything in between. I do it, and I'll do it till my last breath, till I can't do it a fingernail better. And I know I'm speaking to the choir. I'm honored to be with you today. Thank you. Thank you.